Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at LittleAfrica BronxNews, our Meet the Candidates series. Today, we are interviewing Mr. Yves Filius, who is running for City Council in District 16. Yves, welcome. Thank you for joining us today at LittleAfrica BronxNews.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mona, for having me. And thank you, Little Africa, for also having me as well.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So, Yves, please tell us about yourself.
Well, it started many moons ago. I was born and raised in South Bronx, Lincoln Hospital. Grew up in the Crotona section for the first 10 years of my life in front of Crotona Park. Resided with my grandfather, his brownstone, my parents, and my five other brothers and sisters. I attended St. Augustine's School, which was located on Franklin Avenue 167, now called the Harriet Tubman Charter School. Um, for daycare, went to Children's Circle Daycare Center down the block on Fulton and 169. And after school, went to Claremont Center on 169 between 3rd and Washington. In high school, went to Rice High School in Harlem, an old boys school, which unfortunately is no longer there. Another charter school has taken residence there. But during high school, after school, I was a tutor at Southeast Bronx Neighborhood Centers, also known as SEPNIC, located in McKinley and Forest Houses, which I taught peers of my age during that time to get their GED. And I started in politics actually while I was 22 years old in the 79th portion of the district of um, where I grew up under Michael Benjamin, and his tutelage and learning how to be a community liaison. I literally walked in his office one day and asked to volunteer. His response was, how many hours are you going to volunteer today? And I responded, what time does this place close? And he looked at me and he was just like, interesting. In 2 weeks, I volunteered and he hired me. And ever since then, I've been in the political world. I then transitioned after he resigned. And I was lucky to be picked up as an intern for then Assemblywoman Vanessa Gibson, who represented the 77th district, which encompasses the communities of Claremont, Concourse, Highbridge, and Morris Heights. And it was in this community I was introduced to bigger nonprofit organizations, and one in particular, the Yankees organization, and how they helped and intertwined in some of our resident work and other organizations within that community, like Bronx Works and bigger players in the game, and made me understand how to do private and public partnerships. Um, and I was blessed to transition with the Assemblywoman into City Council when she ran and put her hat into office. And I was blessed at that time to transition from being a community liaison and becoming the director of outreach. And during that time, doing things like putting together huge job fairs for our community that had which consisted of a week of job preparation and then eventually going in front of a person to get a job. So just setting up those type of things, which I was extremely blessed and proud to do. And from there, I was given the opportunity to be the special assistant of the first woman of Citywide office, Letitia James, in the public advocate's office. And from there, as her special assistant, I learned how policy can really impact New Yorkers. And one thing in particular that the public advocate pushed was the worst landlords list, which shone light on individuals that owned huge buildings and were and not giving individuals the quality of life that they should have been, like anyone should have. And highlighting that, you can see how people changed and um, and how our people voices were heard. There were traumatic stories that I could personally attest to that no one should live through. But by putting a light and showing how policy works, you know, things have changed, and well, things are changing. And from there, I transitioned back into the Bronx because I learned a lot from the public advocate and wanted to find a way to implement what I learned into my community. And I was blessed to be the political director of the Bronx Democratic Party under former chairperson Marcos Crespo. And during that time, it was the 2016 presidential election. And the Bronx is one of the highest counties in America to vote Democrat. And we were blessed to have certain individuals represent the Democratic nominee of the time and come into the community. And my job was, to host events where rallyings and individual places where agenda items that the president at the time was pushing, especially within our urban community. So I had um, individuals going to and places like Co-op City and Fordham and just galvanizing the outreach on voting. And because of that, the Bronx spiked in voting turnout 7% at that time, which was the highest, at that time. And I was definitely blessed up for the opportunity. And from there, I became a lobbyist for the American Civil Liberties Union of New York, which in Albany, well, my job is pushing legislation. In Albany, we are by bipartisan organization that pushes legislation for all New Yorkers across the state, whether Republican, Democrat, or other. And one big bill that I was really happy to have pushed was the Green Light Bill, which gives any undocumented person in the state the opportunity to have a driver's license. Something as simple as giving the opportunity to take your child to work, no, to school or going to work, safely without having a stigma of being deported or get into a car accident simply and just showing your ID and saying, hey, I am someone, as opposed to going away and causing bigger situations. So that was one bill. Another bill was the farm workers bill, because after the great deal passed by FDR, one particular push was a sharecroppers bill, which people of color were not equal to their white counterparts that were farmers. So farmers in the state of New York at up until this last year did not have rights like a day off or simply you know
Wow.
yeah, hours of just working. Simple guidelines. And we were I'm very happy to say that the farm workers bill was passed, and now just simply being having the right to unionize is one of the things that these farm workers can have the opportunity to do. And this year I was definitely proud to push on the city level during the pandemic, pushing legislation for the first time on the city level, which was the Post Act, the police oversight and surveillance technology bill. And that bill is for, excuse me, public oversight,
Mhm.
um, and public oversight and surveillance of transparency bill of technology, excuse me. And that bill basically is when an office or when NYPD buys any type of surveillance to use for their job, they have to disclose it to the public, city council, and the NYPD inspector general 60 days prior. Before, for instance, in 2010, the
Mhm.
city gave NYPD $30 million in surveillance technology. We do not know what type of technology was bought. Only time that we would know is when it's disclosed under oath and in court after a situation has occurred. That's when we find out what type of technology was used. Do we know that the surveillance or information was given was just? Those are the questions that now we have to find out. So just by having this type of guideline, we would understand, how people that are here to protect us are doing it justly for us.
No, I mean that that's very interesting hearing about the farm workers' rights bill. But
Mhm.
it seems that um, your professional career right now in government has been mostly about protecting the rights of immigrants and workers and communities as well. And in your district, in District 16, you have a very large Muslim community. You have a very large African community. And many of the Africans are drivers. Many of them are Muslims. So I know that many have now benefited from the Green Light Bill. But also, when it comes to the NYPD and the surveillance that they've done over the years, when it comes to profiling, especially Muslims, this legislation that you were instrumental in getting passed really protects the rights of families, of immigrants, um, and of course, of Muslim communities who have been targeted not just here in New York, but in New Jersey as well. But Yves, your roots in this district go back a long way. You've seen,
Yes, it does.
you know, um, growing up in this district, been born in the area, going to school in the area. What do you think of the changes in your district from the time when you grew up to now? What are some of the changes that you've seen that have really enhanced and benefited your community?
Wow. That's a really it's a powerful question. I would say
Yeah.
what benefited our community is the community's resilience. And I have to be just straight foremost. It's the resilience of our people, entrepreneurs and small businesses that continue to push the message and the envelope, have continued to be the lifeblood of the 16th Council and the South Bronx. I can attest that it took an entrepreneur to have the gentleman that you see here today. If it wasn't for my grandfather, you know, risking his life and going into unknown land to become a carpenter and calling his children to come and say, hey, there's opportunity here. My father, his first job was to be a cab driver at a former there was actually two bases that are still that were within the district. The one was on Boston Road, the other was on Claremont Parkway and Park Avenue. And he was a taxi driver within this community. The the grit and the work ethic was unparalleled. That he worked every day. My mom was a home attendant at Daughters of Jacob, which is within the district as well, and other places within across the city. I remember traveling with her to from places from Connecticut to Yonkers, New Rochelle, to beautiful homes and would be there a week or a day just to take care of an individual. But that is the grittiness that continues to churn our community. But the thing is, with that, we have to remind the city and those that the stories and the narrative that has been pushed on us has no longer continued to be the same. It's been dead. You know, we are the roses that have grew from the concrete. Like we've been blossoming. We're doing great things. We're producing greatness, and we have to continue to push that message. And I think that is what the change was. Growing up, I was afforded to be in a Catholic school because my parents paid. You know, they scrounged their money up. I was the only one of my siblings to go to Catholic school because they looked at one school in particular and they felt this was a path, and because of that path, it was an arduous path. You know, we had big brothers and big sisters walking with us to go to Claremont Center just to make sure that we were safe. You know, I can remember that, but on the shining light of it, I can also remember the great days of just unity, of block parties, of really having tangible things, bumping into people, talking to those, and realize, wow, you were a person that was a change agent in our community. And I was blessed to have had mentors like that all through my life in the South Bronx.
That's wonderful. That the South Bronx community is definitely resilient. and it is a continues to be a growing community, a thriving community. Um,
Oh, and I could also, I'm sorry, as you could go, there are a few groups that I have to acknowledge during this time and this growth. One is the Gaifuna community, which has been a community that was in my church. I'm also a life member of St. Augustine's church now, Our Lady of Victory, St. Augustine Our Lady of Victory, located on Webster in the district. And there was a community of folks that people were not aware of that came from the Central American community. There were Central American, but people of color that are dark skinned Central American folks. And it took a tragic event in the early 90s to shine a light on them.
yes,
And
I remember
that was the beginning of of an interesting, oh, I didn't know that there were different types of individuals here. And then we can fast forward a few years later, another tragic event occurred within the Marseillan community with a family and a household. And that's my introduction to the Futa Center on Third Avenue and learning about my Muslim brethren. You know, I was very familiar with the dance halls and the parties on Third, but I didn't understand the roots and the nature and the culture to know that my roots especially come from there as well. A few generations removed, of course, being Haitian American and tying it. So, my church was down the block and we always interacted, but it never came full circle until going into office and
that.
really sitting down. And thankfully, I can say that my relationships have grown within the Muslim community. I am on the 77th side of the district, which I'm proud to say I'm the current district leader of. I have a great relationship with Yan Casa, which is over by Mount Eden, and we have done events over there already of giving out food distribution with 100 Black Men, which is an organization I try to partner up with. So I try to engage with as many individuals and cultural backgrounds as possible because that's how I grew up in this community. It wasn't just my family. I grew up, I am Haitian American, but I was not Haitian American growing up in the South Bronx. So we were literally the only ones in a 10-mile radius. So I mean, I was proud of my culture and I'm very proud of who I am. But I also understood that everyone's culture here is just as important to them, and I love and respect them.
Yes. So, Eves, you one of the things that you brought up when speaking about your time at Public Advocate Tish James's office is the landlord list. You know, Tish would come out with that annual list, but we all know who the city's worst landlord is. That's NYCHA. That's New York City is the city's worst landlord. And I mean, we all know it. It's now October. Soon, once it's going to be November, once it's going to start getting cold, we're going to hear the stories. No heat, no hot water. Year round, we hear the story of no renovations, I mean, the dilapidated apartments, and even though NYCHA or the funding for NYCHA, most of it comes from the federal government, the city still has a responsibility towards NYCHA and towards NYCHA students. So, as city councilman, what what will you do, or what do you see, especially with your legislative background? How can you support and help the tenants of NYCHA complexes, not just in your district, but throughout the city?
Okay. So NYCHA is extremely important to my psyche, to my life. After moving out of my grandfather's home, I moved down to and further in the South Bronx, in my Haven houses, in which I spent 20 years living there. And then after moving a little bit for a few years into Helm Parkway houses. So I'm very, 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 very familiar with NYCHA. And I have witnessed and experienced the deterioration of housing to that was initially created to uplift. It was temporary housing to uplift individuals, during their low times. But it was to encourage folks to sustain themselves and to move on. And NYCHA has failed in that mission from day one, right? I have since at the time I've been alive to present day, that NYCHA has not delivered on their job of sustainability for an individual. So what I would do is first have just a sit down with all of my TA presidents and leaders, through all my NYCHA developments, and have them walk me through what is an everyday life of a NYCHA tenant there, and what are the issues and in particular of their needs, right? That's one. Two, I definitely would love to engage with, hopefully it'll be a new administration of folks at the NYCHA administration to see what type of funding um would come into our community, and how do we three and third, how do we retrofy our community, which is um, retrofitting, well, rectifying. Hold on now. I put it together right. So it's how do we retrofy our community, which is retrofitting or retrofitting our infrastructure and bringing it up to date while rectifying all the institutional racism and practices that was implemented on us, right? Meaning some of the buildings or the developments that were created has not evolved to our current day, meaning where how are individuals slipping through the cracks and from their rent arrears to education, how are we following up on our tenants, how are we keeping up with them? So implementing some new programs, and lastly, from the federal government, ensuring that we get some more money from HUD. Like,
Yeah.
like that's it. That's really it. There is a new proponent in terms of giving residents an opportunity of home ownership, which is RAD. Uh,
Yeah.
that is that is something that I'm interested in looking into,
Mhm.
and, helping to promote. I would, if it looks like it would be on a positive path, I would help to promote it. I'm definitely not, um, championing it in any way, but I know that there is an alternative, and if RAD is an opportunity for individuals to go down the road of homeownership, then I think that should be the case. But we have to prepare our tenants for that, though,
Yes.
you know, and preparation is key. So having these, forums and pushing an agenda, having them as tenants give me a list on what our necessity needs, and campaigning for them, annually to make sure, all right, for McKinley houses, you want a green roof. Let's make a campaign to ensure that, and looking for private funds is final, because we can't just always beg. Well, not beg. We don't do well. First off, I feel that Bronxites, we need charity. We need justice, not charity. So we have always been given charity, but now we need justice.
Yeah.
So that's it.
So that's NYCHA.
Mhm.
Right now, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have a moratorium on evictions.
Mhm.
Um, so many families, just about everyone, has been impacted financially. A lot of families, a lot of Bronxites, um, especially in your district, have
Yeah.
been greatly impacted by this COVID-19 pandemic. As a city councilman, what support would you push for help families who have been financially impacted with COVID-19 when it comes to rent arrears and any other relief for these families. Because the last thing we want is more homeless families, more homeless students. We already have such a high number of homeless families in the system. So, with granted, we have this eviction moratorium, which I think expires in January. But as a city councilman, how would you help these families?
Well, first, my heart goes out to everyone that's going through the COVID, that's continuously going through this pandemic, and we've lost thousands of lives within our district alone, and it's a tragedy how we are continually fighting for resources, right? And communities shouldn't be broken up to fight for resources, but this is where we're at. Um, in regards of getting funds, I would definitely push our new mayor, our next mayor, for a way of giving a relief to those that have lost their jobs, but pushing for more resources in terms of rent. That I think the necessity is food dependency, like finding ways of getting more resources to our people. um and I think that is the real push at the moment, is providing their fridges. We providing what's in the fridge, and financially giving them a subsidy, whether it be a 6 month subsidy or so. But thankfully, with the eviction moratorium, of course, pushing for that again, whether it be another 6 months or so. But we have to find a way of getting our New Yorkers back on afloat, just afloat.
No, that's true. That is true, and everyone's life is affected. Everyone's life is impacted personally, professionally by this. Um, Eves, you, like all other New Yorkers, you hear what's going on right now with regards to COVID-19. The mayor has announced that they're pretty much doing a lockdown in 9 zip codes. None of the zip codes, if I'm not mistaken, are in the Bronx. From
Mhm.
my understanding, it's Brooklyn and Queens. And of course, they're going to be shutting down the schools in those districts. Uh, what is your position on whether or not schools should be open at this point? Are you in favor of schools remaining open? We know that the United Federation of Teachers and the Principals Union, both came out strongly saying that there should be delays. We know that the current public advocate, Chamani Williams, as well as other organizations and parent groups have come out and said that, um, you know, there needs to be delays. The school system is not ready. What's your take on this?
My take on the schools opening currently is that if the mayor and governor can't be on the same page in terms of our children, schools should be closed and the children should be at home. Now, the next problem is, how do we ensure that our students are, not to say that they're not going to be fed or at home, but how do we incorporate a real livable situation for our children, because now they're no longer interacting with their friends and growing, because education is not just about reading, it's about applying. And how can you apply if you're not with a classmate and learning with them? So we have to find a way of incorporating our children together. But at the end of the day, we are in a pandemic. There's a disease out here that we don't know anything about. Safety should be first. And thankfully, earlier this year, New York as a state showed a prime example of how we stuck together and followed the plan, once the pandemic was lifted, once the quarantine was lifted, our numbers showed by us practicing, you know, lives were saved. And we should not expose our children, especially whether we know or not if their immune system is strong, can take it asymptomatic. It doesn't matter. We should not play Russian roulette with our children. So I believe that schools should be closed, and until we find a real alternative, whether it be a vaccine or something, because we know the weather is going down, and if the weather goes down,
Yeah.
we may see another spike. So I strongly feel that schools should be closed.
Okay. In earlier, you mentioned the small businesses in the community. Small businesses are another group that have been greatly impacted. When the city went on lockdown, all non-essential businesses were closed, which pretty much that was so many businesses in our communities. Those same small businesses also employ people in our communities. So, with candidates running now for office, the question is, what is your COVID recovery plan for our small businesses? Because what's happened is government will always bail out Wall Street, but they don't bail out Main Street. And that's always been the problem. And then not too long ago, we found out that when it came to, the small business support, the small business loans, they didn't go to Black and Hispanic and minority owned businesses. The other businesses got it in more affluent neighborhoods, but the businesses in our communities here in the Bronx and other communities throughout the city didn't get access to those COVID relief funds, those COVID relief business funds. So going into the city council, what what is your COVID recovery plan, or how do you foresee you and your your fellow council members helping out to support our small businesses?
Well, thank you so much for that question. That's a real powerful question because I had read not too long ago that out of all the emergency grant money that was given in New York City, only 2% of Bronx businesses received funds. And that is disgusting. And to know that for weeks now we have a business improvement district in the district currently that is fighting because they as a business are paying taxes, but yet $1 billion corporation in our community isn't. So we have this big fight on our hands in terms of ensuring that our mom and pop stores that are implying almost, I mean, 90% of that business, 100% of that business is the community, right? It was either owned by someone from the community or employs someone from the community. And the produce that they're selling comes to the community, right? So it comes full circle. And what I would love to do as councilman is to ensure that I would definitely ensure that we would have an emergency COVID budget for those that are suffering. I know that most MWBEs may not open their doors after this. So I would love for those that are losing their jobs to be first priority of getting something of a recovery. Like that's what I would love to push for. And that doesn't just come to me. That would have to come through the Bronx delegation of new council members of coming together and saying, hey, let's allocate X amount of funds per district to save X of stores. If we say we could put 20,000 together that may save a store, at least let's just have a shot or an opportunity to do that. And lastly, again, private businesses, because not everything comes through the city. We have to partner up with our neighbors. There are neighbors in our community that are given and that would love to ensure that our community survives and strives. So of course, reaching out to folks that want the best for our community is key.
No, that's a very big concern for so many people in our communities because a lot a lot of our families, a lot of community members are employed by these small businesses, and it's small businesses that drive the economy. So they need the support. And in my personal opinion, the city needs to do better to support these small businesses during the pandemic and even post COVID. We hope that they get the support that they need. Um, just switching, just going in a completely new direction. With the COVID-19 pandemic, with everything happening around the country, with the George Floyd protests, with the protests here in New York City, um, you know, there's been a lot of anti-police sentiment, not from everyone, but from many people. And in districts like District 16, there has also been a high increase in gun violence. Overall, just crime is up, but a lot of gun violence, a lot of the homicides um, have happened over the past few months in District 16. So I can understand that for many candidates, this is a topic that they don't really want to touch on. But what is your position on community police relations? Um, how do you see yourself as a councilman working with the NYPD and our communities to ensure that um, families are safe, that children are safe? Um, what is your plan of action when you're a council member to address this? And even in your role as district leader,
Mhm.
how are you working towards improving uh, NYPD and community relations?
So that is under one of my topics is like I call it collective resiliency for our neighbors, and the way that looks is with one in terms of criminal justice, we have to we have to have a space for our children as a community. One, we should not be shocked or surprised when we are looking in the news and see the end result when we look when we don't look at the equation and say, well, that is the reason why this end result occurred. Right, we have our children out here, but where is the institutions that have been provided for them in our community? What is their gateway? One thing I would definitely have to provide and would ensure and toughen up is our youth system, our youth centers in our community. We don't have youth centers that have an acceptance for our children, something to that they can promote, put their energy into. How is it in the South Bronx there's no more Boys and Girls Clubs? We're just building our first Y in how many years? Like, this doesn't make any sense. We have to find an outlet for our children. That's one. Two, in terms of police and community relations, I have to find there are nonprofit groups within the community I love to work with. I have been working with. One is Release the Grip, RTG, and another is Save Our Streets, SOS. Those are um, violent diffusers of former gang members that now change their lives around and going violent interrupters and going into our communities to diffuse things, because we really do have an issue. But how do we rectify that issue, right? And then lastly, going to NYPD and having real community conversations with them and having community events with them, not just having an event and inviting them. No, let's have a collective event together. Let's do a mural together. Let's do a street cleanup together. It's not hey, we're doing this and we're inviting. No, this is how we do collective work together. Back when I was a child, I heard about, community police. Like that was a story of mine. Like, how do we incorporate that again? How do we make it as the people that are here to protect us, not to police us? That is the message. That is what I would love to incorporate. Restoring and giving life to centers for our children to go in, and then simultaneously interacting with the people that are here to protect us, not to police us, and changing that narrative, making sure that we do collective things together, having projects together. That's how we work together, and that's how we live together.
That's good to hear, because the concern is there. Families are afraid, the children are afraid to be out in the playgrounds, um, and it's something that we have to work together on. And
Hmm.
um, like you said, it needs to be a collective effort, doing it together, not one inviting the other, but just collaborating together to get it done.
Hmm.
So,
I will say one thing. Earlier this summer, I came with an idea of doing a community cleanup, and I had the opportunity of hosting two times an event, one in France Eagle Park and other in Joyce Kilmer. And the second event, it was really really good. I was just having a great time and enjoying, and all of a sudden, I saw a paddy wagon pulled over, and the officers came out and they looked around, they grabbed the bag, and they just started picking up because they heard about the event. I didn't reach out, but they knew, and it took amongst themselves to just say, "Hey, let's show that we can be a change, right? And not just a change of just being here, but being productive for the mission of our community, right?" And that little caveat was something that could have changed how many people's ideas of them that day. So that's the message we should have, right? Just because you're doing a job in our community doesn't mean it has to be a job. If you are within a community of people that respect and appreciate the work that you're doing. If you respect the people that make your food, you're gonna respect the people that install the lights in your boat. But it has to come full circle as well, right? You
yes,
know, just the person behind the counter has to have that same respect for the customer. So we have to start breaking these barriers down.
that's true. That's true. The last topic that I want to cover is it it's both environmental and it's healthcare. There was a recent article, I don't know if you saw it in the city,
Hmm.
about the Cross Bronx, about COVID-19 infections and the amount of deaths.
Hmm.
Um, so so you read, you know which article I'm talking about. Listen, the Bronx is known for having the highest asthma infection rates. And now with COVID-19, we can say, guess what? Unfortunately, the Bronx now can be known for having the, the highest number of fatalities. Um, and a lot of them are in your district, centered around the Cross Bronx Expressway. So when it comes to environmental safety and justice and healthcare, reading that article, as a city council person, what would be some of your first steps to addressing this? Because it's literally a life and death situation.
Um, I mean, this question just is something that I've been trying to battle all my life, and the I would have to answer this question with a rhetorical question first, and it's my question that I would love to ask the next mayor of New York. How will you cover up Robert Moses' scar? And Robert Moses was the great city planner, which There's a book named after him, The Power Broker, and he created great infrastructures within our city. But what did it cost? The Cross Bronx was the cost of 1,500 buildings within our community. How many communities were displaced because of that? You
Mhm.
know, and we're not even talking about the worst air quality in America, not just in New York, the
Yes.
East Coast, in America, right? So one big plan that I'm actually currently working on. There will be a panel discussion next month. I have an elected official, a few doctors that will be speaking in regards of alternative ways of reversing that air quality that emits from not only the Cross Bronx but I-87 as well,
Yes.
right? Because we are a community that is encapsulated by two major highways that no other place has seen and literally emits millions of toxins in the air. So one big plan would be to cap the Cross Bronx Expressway, to cover it, not just cover it, but then retrofitting the pillars underneath it with vegetation and greenery that would absorb all the carbon emissions that are passing through, right?
Right.
So
Right.
we suck up as a sponge, we suck up the carbon monoxide and we emit oxygen,
Yes.
much needed oxygen to our community. And not only that, the top of the Cross Bronx would then also be laced with more greenway. I mean, every parkway was created because it was a street that would lead to a major park. You have Mashulu Parkway that leads to Mashulu Park, Pelham Parkway. We have all these parkways Claremont Parkway, which leads to parks, but we have this huge corridor with no greenery that gives or emits anything to us but toxins, right? So that would be a way of just alleviating all of that precious not just alleviate the toxicity and then give us precious air in return. So of course this panel discussion is getting funds, and I mean this is a task that is a monumentous task. It's not just 3 years from now. No, this would be a decade or two. This is a planting a seed and not sitting under the shade opportunity. I may never see the ending of the capping of the Cross Bronx, but we know that this vision and this goal is for the betterment of our children, our grandchildren.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know.
I did not know about that, and I'm saying it. I'd like an invitation. We'd love to cover this.
All right.
Uh, you know, I am the mother of two children with severe asthma. I both personally and professionally, I definitely want to learn more about this discussion, this exploration, dealing with the situation with the Cross Bronx. Um, so, Eves, I asked all the candidates this question, and granted, it's not a lot of money, but if you had $1 million and you were given the $1 million and told you could do with it, you could give it to whichever program, you could do with it what you want for your district. What would you use that million
All right. $1 million. I know you're right. It's not a lot,
on?
but I mean, it's so much going on. I mean, we have so many issues from Conqueror's Village, with their parking lot issues, with their infrastructure issues, up to High Bridge with not having a youth center. Those are some issues. So I would say with the $1 million, half of it, so half a million, will go to making subsidies, for those that are going through a pandemic, a crisis, or who's lost a job or so. I would try to allocate $500,000 to those that would live within my zip code for some housing subsidies. That would be one. I would then do 250 to try to retrofit any youth organization or help create a after school program or such, or financial literacy, which is one of my biggest goals for our kids. Pushing um, penny banks within our schools.
Yeah.
Hopefully, our students could start with just having a bank account, and at the end, by the time they graduate, would have money that they could hopefully get a stock or invest in getting a home. So that is another plan. And the last 250, I would love to push for grandparent homes. There is one building in our district, the PSS Grandparents, which is seniors that have guardianship over their grandchildren, and implementing that, pushing for another building like that, because we do have a large amount of guardianships
Yes.
of folks that aren't their parents over
Mhm.
children. So that, pushing for that type of housing. So that's what I would use with the mill.
Okay.
Hmm.
So your what would you like to leave our viewers, your constituents, your current constituents, and your future constituents with with regard
Um,
to your candidacy?
all right. Well, again, my name is Yves Filius. I'm currently a district leader of the 77th Assembly District, but I'm running for candidate of the 16th Council. I'm running for the 16th Council and the City Council of Bronx. I'm born and raised and bred, shining example of your community. I call everyone who is my age or younger a phoenix, because everyone said the Bronx was burning when it was created. Well, when during my time, it was burnt, and when during that time we have risen from the ashes, and we are phoenixes, because everything we do when we step out our home is life changing, because we weren't expected to make that change and to begin with. And I want to leave all my constituents with something that Reverend Barber, William Barber, has been promoting. We have to do more. Every time we do something, we have to do more, and more is to mobilize. We have to mobilize ourselves. We have to, if we have an issue, if we have something that hurts us or ills us, or if we want to make something happen, let's mobilize each other. Then O is for organize. Once we mobilize, we have to organize each other in terms of what is the message, what is the goal, and how are we going to go. And after that is register, because whatever you have to do, you have to register to make sure that your voice is heard, right? In order for your voice to be heard, you have to register. That means whether that is a parent teacher conference, you have to register to say your name, community board meeting, at church, you have to register, sign up so your voice can be heard. And E is to educate, because once you do, once you put your voice out there and you learn something, you have to tell someone else. So let's continue to do more.
Well, thank you, Yves Filius, for joining us today at Little Africa Bronx News. We will be watching your campaign and wishing you and all the candidates the best of luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And please go online to nycheves.com to learn more, to sign up, anything. Thank you, Mona, so much for the opportunity. I definitely appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for joining us.